teen girl saved a Hell's Angel from a burning wreck. His $1,000,000 thank you shocked everyone. The clock above the diner's kitchen door read 11:47 when Mia finally untied her apron. Her feet throbbed inside her sneakers, the kind of ache that settled deep into the bone after 8 hours of carrying plates and refilling coffee cups for people who barely looked at her. She counted the crumpled bills one more time, smoothing each one flat against the steel counter. $43. She sighed and folded the money into her jacket pocket. $43 wouldn't even touch the bill that came last week from the hospital, the one with numbers so big they didn't look real anymore. Carmen kept it hidden under the fruit bowl, but Mia had seen it. She always saw things her grandmother tried to hide. "You look like a truck ran you over, kid," Rosie said, wiping down the counter with a rag that had seen better decades. "Why don't you let me call you a ride?" "I'm good, Rosie. Really?" Mia forced a smile. "Walking helps me think." Rosie gave her a look that said she didn't believe a word of it, but she let it go. She always did. That was Rosie's way. She'd slip an extra biscuit into Mia's to-go bag or pretend she miscounted the tip jar in Mia's favor, but she never pushed too hard. Mia appreciated that more than Rosie probably knew. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story outside. The rain came down in sheets, hammering the parking lot and turning the gravel into a shallow river. Mia pulled her hood up, though it wouldn't do much good. The truck sat parked crooked by the dumpster, its transmission grinding like broken glass every time she tried to start it. Carmen said they'd get it looked at soon, but soon had become a word that didn't mean anything anymore. Everything was soon. The bills were soon. The roof leak was soon. Everything waited in a long line behind soon, and none of it ever got its turn. So she walked. Route 9 stretched out in front of her, a long ribbon of wet asphalt lit only by the occasional street lamp, most of them flickering like they were thinking about giving up too. Mia kept close to the shoulder, her sneakers slapping through puddles, water soaking through the canvas until her toes went numb. The diner smell of grease and burnt coffee clung to her hair. She thought about her nursing books stacked on her nightstand, the ones she read after Carmen fell asleep, the pages soft from being turned so many times. She thought about becoming someone who fixed people instead of just serving them fries. She thought about her father, wherever he was, and whether he ever thought about her. The rain made everything feel slower, like the whole world had been dipped in gray. Cars passed occasionally, headlights slicing through the downpour, tires hissing against the wet road. Mia kept walking, hugging her arms across her chest, counting streetlights instead of dollars for a while, just to give her mind something else to do. She was maybe a mile from home, right where Route 9 curved past the old grain silo when she heard it. Tires screeched behind her, a horrible tearing sound that ripped through the quiet night. She spun around just in time to see a motorcycle come sliding sideways out of the rain, its headlights swinging wildly across the road like a searchlight gone mad. The rider fought the handlebars, but the wet asphalt had already taken the choice away from him. The bike hit a slick patch, and the back end kicked out. Metal screamed against metal as it caught the guardrail, flipping once, twice, the rider's body launching free of the frame like a rag doll. He hit the ground and rolled, coming to a stop in the wet grass near the shoulder. The motorcycle wasn't so lucky. It slammed into the guardrail with a deafening crash, crumpling like a soda can before flames burst up from somewhere near the engine, orange light licking hungrily against the black, rain-soaked night. Mia stood frozen for half a second, rain pouring down her face, her heart hammering so loud she could hear it over the fire. Then, she heard it, a groan, low and pained, cutting through the roar of the fire and the hiss of rain hitting hot metal. That sound broke whatever had been holding her in place. Mia's feet moved before her brain caught up, sliding down the wet embankment toward the wreck. Mud sucked at her sneakers. Her hands grabbed at wet weeds and rocks to keep from falling, tearing her palms raw, but she barely felt it. The flames were growing now, crawling up from the engine block, painting the rain in shades of orange and gold. Black smoke curled into the night sky, thick and choking. "Hey! Hey, can you hear me?" She shouted, her voice cracking. The rider lay twisted in the wet grass a few feet from the burning bike, one leg bent at a wrong angle, his leather vest soaked dark with rain and something else. Blood. It ran from a gash near his temple, mixing pink with the rainwater pooling beneath him. He was a big man, thick through the shoulders, arms covered in faded tattoos that disappeared under torn sleeves. A patch on his vest read something she couldn't fully make out through the smoke and rain, but none of that mattered right now. He groaned again, his head rolling to the side. Okay, I've got you." Mia's voice shook, but she kept talking, kept moving. Rosie always said talking helped when your hands were scared. She grabbed him under the arms, her sneakers slipping in the mud as she pulled. He was heavy, heavier than anyone she'd ever tried to move. Her muscles screamed in protest, the strain shooting up through her back and shoulders. But she gritted her teeth and pulled harder. The heat from the fire pressed against her skin now, close enough that she could feel it baking through her wet jacket. "Come on," she gasped, digging her heels into the soft ground. Come on. The flames found the fuel line. A hiss, then a crackling pop, like the whole bike was breathing fire. Mia didn't look back. She hauled the man another few feet, her arms burning, her lungs filling with smoke and the sharp tang of gasoline. He was limp in her grip, dead weight, his head lolling against her arm. She could feel his pulse, though, faint and fast beneath her fingers where she gripped his wrist. That was something. That was everything. She pulled him past the guardrail, over a shallow ditch already filling with rainwater, putting as much distance between them and the wreck as her shaking legs would allow. The gas tank went up like a bomb. The explosion knocked the breath out of her, a wave of heat and sound that rolled over them both. Mia threw herself over the man without thinking, shielding his head with her arms as heat washed across her back. Debris rained down somewhere behind them, hissing as it hit wet grass. Her ears rang. For a second, everything went white and silent, like the whole world had been swallowed by the blast. Then, the rain came back. The cold, the ringing in her ears, started to fade into the distant howl of the fire eating what was left of the motorcycle. Mia rolled off him, gasping, her whole body trembling. She looked down at the man's face, pale under the streetlight, blood running steady from the gash near his temple. No, stay with me." She yanked her soaked jacket off her shoulders, balling it up, pressing it hard against his head wound. Blood soaked through the fabric almost instantly, warm against her freezing fingers. Her hands shook so badly, it took her 3 tries to pull her phone from her jacket pocket before she'd taken it off. She jabbed at the screen, leaving bloody smudges across the glass. 911. "What's your emergency?" There's been a crash, Mia said, her voice breaking. Rain running down her face, mixing with something that might have been tears. Route 9, near the old grain silo. A motorcycle. He's hurt bad. There's blood. He's not waking up. Please, please hurry. She pressed the jacket harder against his head, watching his chest rise and fall in shallow, uneven breaths, and stayed right there beside him in the mud and the rain, refusing to let go. Red and blue lights cut through the rain before Mia even heard the sirens. 2 ambulances and a fire truck rolled up along the shoulder of Route 9, tires crunching on wet gravel. Doors slammed. Boots pounded toward her. "Ma'am." "Step back. Let us in there." A paramedic dropped to his knees beside the biker, another right behind him with a bag full of gear. Mia scrambled back on shaky legs, her soaked jacket still clutched in one hand, dark with blood. "He wasn't breathing right," she said, her voice hoarse. His pulse was fast, but it felt weak. "There's a cut on his head. I tried to keep pressure on it." The paramedic glanced up at her for half a second, taking in her soaked hair, her scraped hands, the way she was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "You did good, kid. Real good." He turned back to the biker, pressing gauze against the wound, calling out numbers to his partner that Mia didn't understand. Firefighters were already spraying foam over what was left of the burning motorcycle, the flames hissing down into smoke. The whole scene smelled like burnt rubber and rain. "We got a pulse, but it's thready. Let's move." They lifted the man onto a backboard, strapping him down fast and careful, and Mia watched his head loll to the side, blood still trickling from beneath the bandage they'd pressed against his temple. "Wait," Mia said, stepping forward. "Is he going to be okay?" "We're doing everything we can," the paramedic said, not unkindly, as they wheeled the stretcher toward the open ambulance doors. "You did the right thing calling us when you did." Another few minutes out here and it might have been a different story. Mia's chest tightened. She didn't know this man, had no idea who he was or where he came from, but something about seeing him lying there, pale and broken, made her feel like she couldn't just walk away now. "I want to come," she blurted out. "I mean, can I ride with him? Or follow you? I need to know he's okay." The paramedic hesitated, glancing at his partner, then back at her. "You family?" "No," Mia admitted. "I just pulled him out. I don't even know his name." "Not protocol to bring civilians in the rig," he said, already climbing in behind the stretcher. "But you can follow us to Mercy General if you've got a way there. They'll let you know how he's doing at the front desk." Mia nodded, already turning toward the dark road, her legs still trembling from the adrenaline and cold rain soaking through her clothes. She had no car. She'd have to run, or call someone, or something. But she wasn't going home. Not yet. By the time she reached the hospital, nearly 40 minutes later, after catching a ride from a passing trucker who'd seen her waving frantically on the side of the road, Mia felt like she might collapse. Her uniform was still damp, smelling like smoke and rain, and her sneakers squished with every step across the tiled floor of Mercy General's waiting room. She sank into a plastic chair near the window, pulling her phone from her pocket with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. The screen was cracked from the fall down the embankment, but it still worked. She dialed Carmen's number, pressing the phone to her ear. "Mia? Baby, where are you? It's almost midnight. I've been worried sick." "Grandma, I'm okay, Mia said quickly, her voice cracking despite her best efforts to sound calm. There was an accident. A motorcycle crashed on Route 9. I pulled the guy out before it caught fire all the way. I'm at Mercy General now. I didn't want to leave until I knew he was okay. There was a long pause on the other end. You're at the hospital? Alone? I'm fine, I promise. Just tired. I'm coming to get you right now, Carmen said, and Mia could already hear keys jingling in the background. Don't you move. 20 minutes later, Carmen rushed through the sliding doors, her coat thrown over her nightgown, worry etched deep into every line of her face. She pulled Mia into a fierce hug the moment she reached her, holding on like she might never let go. Who was he? Carmen asked, once they'd settled into the hard plastic chairs, waiting for any word. Do you know his name? Mia shook her head, staring down at her scraped, blood-stained hands. No idea, but I hope he makes it through the night. Duke Callahan woke up to the sound of beeping. Slow, steady beeping. His head throbbed like someone had taken a wrench to it, and when he tried to move, pain shot down his arm so sharp he sucked in a breath through his teeth. Easy there, a voice said. You've got a line in that arm. He blinked against the harsh light. White ceiling, white walls, the smell of bleach and something chemical underneath it. A hospital. He hated hospitals. Duke turned his head, slow, careful, and found a nurse standing near the foot of his bed, a clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. She was young, maybe not even 30, and her eyes kept flicking from his face to something over his shoulder. He followed her gaze. His cut, his leather vest with all its patches, the skull and wings of the Hell's Angels stitched across the back, was draped over a chair by the window. Someone had hung it up careful, like they didn't want to touch it more than they had to. Where am I? Duke said. His voice came out rough, like sandpaper dragged over gravel. Mercy General, the nurse said. You've been here 3 days. You were in an accident, a motorcycle crash out on Route 9. 3 days. Duke tried to sit up, and the room tilted sideways. The nurse hurried forward, hands out like she wanted to stop him, but wasn't sure she should touch him either. You need to lie back down, Misser. She glanced at the clipboard. Callahan, Misser Callahan, you took a bad hit to the head. Broken arm, 3 broken ribs, and you lost a lot of blood. You're lucky to be alive. Duke lay back, staring up at the ceiling tiles, trying to piece together what had happened. Rain, the bike sliding out from under him on the wet road. Then, nothing. Just black. Another nurse poked her head into the room, an older woman with gray streaks in her hair, and her eyes went straight to the tattoos running up both of Duke's arms. Thick black ink of skulls and flames, and a woman's name he hadn't spoken out loud in 20 years. She didn't say anything, just nodded once and disappeared back into the hallway, but Duke had seen that look before. He'd seen it his whole life. People took one look at him, at the leather and the ink and the size of him, and they got nervous, like he might reach out and bite somebody. He was used to it, didn't much care anymore, if he was honest, but laying there in that thin hospital gown, weak as a kitten, it stung a little more than usual. Somebody pulled you out, the young nurse said, checking the monitor beside his bed, still not quite meeting his eyes. Before the bike caught fire, the paramedics said if she hadn't got to you when she did. She, Duke repeated. A girl. Teenager, I think. She followed the ambulance here that night, waited in the lobby for hours before her grandmother came and took her home. The nurse finally looked at him directly, and something in her face softened. Just a little. She's been back every day since. After her shift at the diner where she works. Just sits outside your room for a few minutes, asks how you're doing, then leaves. Never asked for anything. Never even gave her name to the front desk. Duke didn't know what to make of that. In his experience, people didn't do things without wanting something back. Everybody had an angle. Even the brothers in his own chapter, men he'd bleed for, they all understood that debts got paid one way or another. That was how the world worked. He was still turning that thought over in his head, hours later, staring at the ceiling and half dozing, when he heard soft footsteps in the doorway. He opened his eyes, and there she was. A slim girl, maybe 17, dark hair still damp like she'd just come from a shower after a shift somewhere, wearing a diner uniform with a name tag that read MIA. She didn't flinch when she saw him, didn't glance nervously at his tattoos or take a step back like the nurses had. She just looked relieved, plain and simple, like she'd been holding her breath for 3 days and could finally let it out. "You're awake," she said, and something in her voice cracked with relief. I was starting to worry. Duke stared at her, caught off guard by the sheer, uncomplicated kindness on her face. Nobody looked at him like that. Not in a long, long time. "Who are you?" Duke asked, though he already knew the answer somehow. "Mia," she said. "Mia Torres. I go by the diner most nights, so I figured I'd stop in on my way home. Make sure you didn't, you know. Die on me after all that trouble I went through." There was a little smile at the corner of her mouth when she said it, and Duke found himself almost smiling back, which was strange because he couldn't remember the last time that had happened in a hospital bed. "You pulled me out," he said. It wasn't a question. "You were stuck. I saw the whole thing happen, the bike sliding, you going over the guardrail. I just did what anybody would do." She shrugged like it was nothing, like she hadn't nearly died herself doing it. "Not anybody," Duke said. His voice was still rough, but there was something else in it now. Respect, maybe. Most people would have called 911 and stayed in their car. Mia didn't have an answer for that, so she just shrugged again and glanced at the monitors, the way people did when they didn't know what to say next. Over the following days, Duke asked about her. Not directly. Not at first. He asked the young nurse, the one who'd told him about the girl in the lobby. He asked the woman who brought his meal trays. He learned that Mia worked nearly every shift at Rosie's Diner on the edge of town, mornings before school and nights after, sometimes both on the same day. He learned she lived with her grandmother, a woman named Carmen, in a single wide trailer out past the old grain silos, the kind of place where the roof leaked when it rained hard and the heat cut out in January. That girl's been carrying her whole family on her back since she was 14, the older nurse told him one afternoon, checking his chart without quite looking at him. Her grandmother's got medical bills stacked up from years back. Heart trouble, I heard. Insurance didn't cover half of it. Mia works every hour God gives her just to keep the lights on. Duke lay there and turned that over in his mind like a stone he couldn't put down. He thought about himself at 17, sleeping in the back of a garage because his own parents hadn't wanted him around anymore. Nobody had pulled him out of anything. He'd had to claw his own way out, and it had taken years before he found people who'd stand beside him without wanting something in return. This girl reminded him of that boy, the one nobody had helped. When Mia visited again the next evening, tired-looking, her uniform smelling faintly of fryer grease, Duke finally asked her straight out, Your grandmother. She sick? Mia's face changed, just slightly. Guarded now. She's got a heart condition. Has for years. The bills never really go away, they just get bigger. She said it plain, like a fact of weather, like it was just something you learned to live under. And you take care of her. Somebody's got to, Mia said. She raised me. My dad. He left a long time ago. It's just been the two of us since I was little. Duke didn't say much after that, but something in him had shifted, hardened into a decision. He was done lying in that bed, done letting doctors poke at him and nurses whisper behind his back. There was a debt here, and Duke Callahan did not leave debts unpaid. 3 days later, against the sharp objections of a doctor who told him his ribs weren't fully healed and his head trauma needed more monitoring, Duke signed himself out of Mercy General. He pulled his cut back on over his hospital gown, wincing at the pull in his ribs, and sat on the edge of the bed until a nurse reluctantly brought him a wheelchair to the front doors. From a payphone in the hospital lobby, since his own cell phone had been crushed in the wreck, he called the clubhouse. Bear picked up on the second ring. Need you and a couple of the guys, Duke said. Tomorrow morning. Bring the spare bike. There's someone I need to go see. Everything all right, Duke? Better than all right, Duke said, looking down at the small scrap of paper where a nurse had scribbled an address at his request. I got a debt to settle. The morning sun hadn't even burned off the fog yet when Carmen heard it. A low rumble, far off at first, like thunder rolling in from the highway. She set down her coffee cup and moved to the window, pulling back the thin curtain with 2 fingers. The sound grew louder. Then, louder still, until the whole trailer seemed to hum with it. Mia, Carmen called, her voice tight. Mia, come look at this. Mia came shuffling out of her room in socks, still in her diner uniform from the night before because she'd been too tired to change before falling asleep on top of the covers. She joined her grandmother at the window, and both of them watched as 5 motorcycles turned off the main road and rolled slowly down their gravel street. Engines growling low and deep, chrome catching the early light. At the front of the pack was Duke, sitting tall on a bike that wasn't his own, his cut zipped over what looked like a hospital gown still poking out at the collar. Behind him came 4 more riders, big men with beards and leather vests covered in patches, engines idling as they pulled up in a rough line along the ditch in front of the Torres trailer. Up and down the street, curtains twitched, a door cracked open 2 trailers down, and old Mr. Petrie stood in his bathrobe, squinting out at the commotion. Across the road, a woman scooped up her toddler and hurried inside, throwing one more look over her shoulder before shutting the door hard. Somebody's dog started barking and wouldn't stop. Mia, Carmen whispered, gripping her granddaughter's arm. Who is that? What is this? That's him, Mia said, her eyes wide. That's the guy from the crash. The one I pulled off the road. He's got an entire motorcycle gang with him. I don't think it's a gang, Grandma. I think it's a club. Carmen didn't look convinced. She smoothed down her house dress with shaking hands and glanced at the phone on the kitchen counter, like she was already imagining calling somebody, though she couldn't have said who. Outside, Duke swung his leg off the bike slow and careful, wincing at the pull in his ribs. He said something to the men behind him, low and short, and they stayed put, engines cutting off one by one until the street went quiet except for the wind and the barking dog. He walked up the gravel path to the trailer steps, and by then more neighbors had come out onto their porches, arms crossed, whispering behind their hands. A few had their phones out, filming. Carmen opened the door before he could knock. Up close, she could see the healing cuts on his face, the stiff way he held his side. "Mrs. Torres?" Duke said. His voice was rough but careful, like he was choosing each word with some effort. "That's right," Carmen said, her chin lifting even though her hands were still trembling at her sides. "My name's Duke Callahan. Your granddaughter pulled me out of a burning motorcycle 9 days ago. Didn't think twice about it, from what I hear. Didn't ask for anything. Just did it because it needed doing." Mia stood behind her grandmother in the doorway, cheeks going pink under the weight of every eye on the street. "I don't leave a debt like that unpaid," Duke said. He reached inside his cut and pulled out an envelope, slightly bent from the ride, and held it out toward Carmen with both hands, like he was offering something fragile. Carmen took it slowly, unsure, and slid a finger under the flap. She pulled out a slip of paper, a check, and her eyes moved down to the number printed there. Her breath caught in her throat. "This says," she started, then stopped, reading it again like the number might change if she looked hard enough. "This can't be right." "It's right," Duke said. $1 million. For your granddaughter, saving my life." Behind him, up and down the street, the whispering had turned into open murmuring. Neighbors leaning toward each other, phones angled to catch every word. Someone said the word drug money loud enough to carry. Someone else said gang like it was an accusation. Carmen just stood there, the check trembling in her hand, staring at Duke like she couldn't decide if she should thank him or slam the door. The community hall smelled like old coffee and floor wax. Someone had set up folding chairs in crooked rows, and by 6:30 every single one was full. More people stood along the back wall, arms crossed, and a few kids peeked in through the propped door before their mothers pulled them back. Nervous neighbor, whose name was actually Dale Whitfield, stood at the front with a clipboard he didn't need, tapping it against his leg. He'd been the one to call around, going door to door and phone to phone, telling everybody there needed to be a meeting. Something needed to be said, he told them. Somebody needed to ask the hard questions. "We're not here to cause trouble," Dale said once the room had mostly quieted down. His voice cracked a little on the word trouble. "We just want some answers. That's all. $1 million doesn't come from nowhere." A murmur rolled through the crowd, heads nodding. Mia sat near the front next to Carmen, her stomach twisted into a hard knot. She hated this. Hated that people were treating Duke like a criminal on trial, hated that her grandmother's hands were folded so tight in her lap the knuckles had gone white. Duke walked in a few minutes late, and the whole room seemed to lean back from him at once, like a wave pulling away from the shore. He wasn't wearing his cut tonight, just a plain gray shirt and jeans, but the tattoos still climbed up his forearms and his neck, and his size alone filled the doorway. He walked to the front without hurrying and stood there, hands loose at his sides, waiting. "Go on, then," he said. "Ask your questions." Dale cleared his throat. "Folks want to know where that kind of money comes from. A man in a motorcycle club. It's not exactly normal." "No," Duke agreed. "It's not." Somebody in the back said the word drugs again, not quite under their breath. Duke didn't even flinch. "I hear what you're all thinking," he said, his voice calm and even, carrying easy across the quiet room. "Drug money. Stolen money. Something dirty. I get why you'd think that. Look at me. Why wouldn't you?" He paused, rubbing a hand over his jaw. 20-some years ago, I was a mechanic. Worked on bikes because it was the only thing I was ever good at. And I noticed something wrong with the way brakes locked up on wet roads, how riders were dying because the systems weren't built right. So I started tinkering. Took me years, working nights, teaching myself things out of library books because I never finished high school. Eventually, I built something that worked. A safety braking part. Patented it under a name that wasn't mine, sold the rights to a company that makes parts for half the motorcycles on the road today. The room had gone completely silent. I've been living off those royalties ever since, Duke said, quietly, because the second people find out a man's got money, they start looking at him different. Wanting things. Trying to take it. So I kept riding with the club, kept wearing the leather, let people think what they wanted to think. It kept me safe, kept me left alone. He looked around the room, meeting eyes here and there, not backing down from any of them. The angels took me in when I was 15, he said. My own mother and father dropped me at a bus station and drove off, told me to figure it out myself. The club was the first family that ever wanted me around, didn't ask questions, didn't need me to be anything but what I was. So don't stand here and tell me what kind of man wears a cut. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Dale looked down at his clipboard like it might have answers written on it. Somewhere in the back, a chair creaked. Then Mia noticed her grandmother had gone pale, the color draining clean out of her face, like someone had pulled a plug. Carmen was staring at Duke, her mouth slightly open, one hand pressed flat against her chest. "Grandma?" Mia whispered. "You okay?" Carmen didn't answer right away. She kept staring, like she was looking straight through Duke into some other time altogether. Finally, she leaned close to Mia's ear. "I need to speak with him," she whispered. "Alone. After this is over." The crowd took its time leaving. People clustered in little knots by the door, talking low, glancing back at Duke every few seconds like they still weren't sure it was safe to turn their backs on him. Dale Whitfield shook Duke's hand on the way out, mumbling something about being sorry for the fuss, and Duke just nodded and let it go. He didn't seem to need the apology. He never seemed to need much of anything from anybody, which was one of the things Mia had come to notice about him. Carmen waited until the room had mostly cleared before she touched Mia's arm. "Wait here a minute, sweetheart," she said. "I need to talk to Duke." Mia frowned. "About what?" "Just wait here," Carmen said again, and there was something in her voice, a tightness Mia had never heard before, that made her stop asking. Carmen crossed the room toward Duke, who was gathering his jacket off the back of a folding chair. She stopped a few feet away from him, and Mia watched her grandmother's hands twist together in front of her, the way they did when she was filling out forms for the electric company or waiting on test results from the doctor. "Mr. Callahan," Carmen said. "Could I have a word? Just a moment of your time." Duke looked up. Surprised. "Sure thing. What's on your mind?" Carmen glanced around the emptying hall, then lowered her voice. "Not here. Someplace quieter." They moved to the corner by the coat rack, near a bulletin board covered in flyers for a bake sale and a lost cat. Mia stayed by the folding chairs, arms crossed, watching from across the room. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she could see her grandmother's face, and that was enough to worry her. Carmen's jaw was tight. Her eyes kept darting to Duke's arms, to his neck, like she was searching for something specific and hadn't found it yet, or maybe she had and wished she hadn't. "Mr. Callahan," Carmen said quietly, once they were tucked into the corner. "I want to ask you something, and I need you to just trust me on this, even though I can't explain why right now." Duke's brow furrowed. "All right, that check," Carmen said. "The one you gave me. I'd like to ask you to hold off on it. Finalizing it, I mean. Don't cash anything through the bank yet, don't make it official." Duke studied her for a long moment. "Ma'am, I don't follow. That money's already yours. Ain't nothing to hold off on." "Please," Carmen said, and her voice cracked just slightly on the word, enough that Duke's expression shifted from confusion to something gentler. "I just need some time. I need to be sure it's for the right reasons before I can accept something like that." "The right reasons," Duke repeated slowly. "It's a thank you. That's all it ever was. Your granddaughter pulled me out of a fire." "I know," Carmen said. "I know that's true, but there's more to it than you understand right now, and I'm not ready to explain it yet. I will. I promise you I will. Just not tonight." Duke looked at her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly, not with suspicion exactly, but with the look of a man trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Whatever he saw in Carmen's face, whatever exhaustion or fear or old grief was sitting there behind her eyes, it seemed to settle something in him. "All right," he said finally. "You want me to hold off? I'll hold off. No rush on my end. Money'll keep." Carmen let out a breath like she'd been holding it since the meeting started. "Thank you." "You gonna tell me what this is about?" "Soon," Carmen said. "I promise. Just not tonight." Duke nodded slowly, though the confusion never quite left his face, and reached down to grab his jacket off the chair. "All right then. I'll see you both around." He walked out into the parking lot, and a moment later Mia heard the low rumble of a motorcycle engine starting up outside, then fading into the night. Carmen came back across the room, and Mia searched her grandmother's face for answers, but Carmen only reached for her hand. "Let's go home," she said. "It's late." They walked home together under a sky full of scattered stars, the gravel crunching beneath their shoes, and neither of them said a word the entire way. Mia glanced sideways at her grandmother more than once, wanting to ask, wanting to understand what had just happened back there, but something about the set of Carmen's shoulders told her now wasn't the time. She'd never seen her grandmother look so shaken, not even during the worst of the medical bills. Not even during the loneliest nights after Mia's father left. Whatever this was, it went back further than any of that. A week went by, and Duke didn't come around. Mia kept expecting him to. Every time the diner door chimed, she looked up, half hoping to see him ducking under the frame in that leather jacket of his. But it was never him. Just truckers and regulars, and old Mr. Pemberton, who came in every day at 2 for his coffee and crossword puzzle. Carmen wasn't talking either. She'd gone quiet in a way that scared Mia more than shouting ever could have. She'd catch her grandmother standing at the kitchen window some evenings, staring out at nothing, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold. When Mia asked if she was okay, Carmen always said the same thing. "Just tired, sweetheart. Just tired." But it wasn't the same tired as before. This was a different kind, one that sat behind her eyes instead of in her shoulders. Mia carried her own worry into her shifts at Rosie's, refilling ketchup bottles and wiping down booths with her mind somewhere else entirely. Rosie noticed. Rosie always noticed. "You're gonna wear a hole in that counter if you keep scrubbing it like that," Rosie said one afternoon, leaning against the register with her arms crossed. "What's got you so far away today?" "Nothing," Mia said. Just tired. Rosie raised an eyebrow but let it go, the way she usually did when she figured a person needed space more than questions. It was a Thursday, slow and gray outside, rain threatening but not committing, when Mia heard it. The low growl of a motorcycle engine, coming up the road, then slowing, then turning into the gravel lot outside the diner windows. She knew that sound now. She'd know it anywhere. Duke pulled up near the door and cut the engine, and for a second he just sat there on the bike, helmet still on, like he was working up the nerve to come inside. Then he swung his leg over, pulled the helmet off, and walked in, the little bell over the door jingling like it did for anybody else, like he was just a regular customer and not the man half the town had been whispering about for a week. Mia set down the coffee pot she was holding. "Duke? Mia?" He nodded at her, looking a little out of place standing there among the vinyl booths and the laminated menus, like a bear that had wandered into somebody's kitchen. "You got a minute? Or you working?" "I'm working till 4. You want a table? I'll sit at the counter." "Don't want to take up a whole booth for just me." He settled onto one of the stools, and Mia poured him a coffee without being asked, sliding it across the counter the way she did for the regulars. He wrapped both hands around the mug, but didn't drink it right away. "I wanted to come by," he said. "Been meaning to all week. Just wanted to say something to you proper. Not in front of the whole town. Not with your grandmother and the money and all that noise. Just you and me." Mia leaned against the counter, drying a glass with a rag out of habit. "Okay, what you did?" Duke said. And he looked down at his coffee like it was easier than looking at her, pulling me out of that fire. That was a brave thing. A real brave thing. Most people would have kept walking, called it in from a safe distance. Maybe you didn't do that. "I didn't think about it," Mia said. "I just did it." "That's what makes it brave," Duke said. "Thinking about it and doing it anyway, that's brave too, but what you did, that's something else. That's just who you are, deep down. Don't figure that changes much." He finally looked up at her. "So, thank you. For real, not for the cameras, not for the town. Just you and me." Mia felt her throat tighten a little, and she busied herself with the coffee pot again so she wouldn't have to say anything right away. "You're welcome," she finally managed. They sat there a while, Duke sipping his coffee, Mia finishing out the last of her shift, refilling cups and clearing plates while he watched the diner hum along around him. When 4 o'clock came and her shift ended, she untied her apron and hung it on the hook by the register, and instead of leaving, she came back around the counter and sat down on the stool next to him. "You got time for one more cup?" she asked. "Since I'm off now." Duke almost smiled. "Yeah, I got time." Rosie poured them both a fresh round without being asked, throwing Mia a look that said she'd have questions later, and disappeared into the back. "So," Duke said, turning his mug slowly on the counter. "Tell me something about yourself. Something that ain't about saving my life or your grandmother's money." Mia thought about it. "I want to be a nurse." That got his attention. "Yeah? What kind? ER, probably. I don't know yet. I just know I want to help people, like really help them, not just serve them coffee." She glanced at him. "No offense to Rosie's. None taken, I'm guessing," Duke said, and for the first time, something like a real smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "That's a good thing to want. Hard work though, nursing. I know. I've seen it. My grandma's been sick a lot. I've watched the nurses take care of her. Some of them are really good at it. Some of them aren't. She shrugged. I want to be one of the good ones. Duke nodded slowly, like he was turning something over in his head. You got a way to get to school? Study? All that? I take the bus mostly. When our truck's running, I drive it, but it's been dying on us for months. Grandma says we can't afford to fix it right now, not with everything else. Duke was quiet for a second. Then he said, gruffly, like it cost him something to offer it, I know engines. Better than most mechanics in this town, probably. Bring that truck by some time. I'll take a look at it. No charge. Mia blinked at him. You don't have to do that. Didn't say I had to, Duke said. Said I would. Saturday morning came bright and clear, the kind of day where the sky looked freshly washed. Mia heard the motorcycle before she saw it, that same low growl rolling up the dirt road toward the trailer. She was already outside, sitting on the porch steps with a glass of orange juice, when Duke pulled up. This time hauling a small trailer hitched behind his bike with a metal toolbox strapped down in the back. You said Saturday, Mia said, standing up. I didn't think you meant it for real. I don't say things I don't mean, Duke said, swinging off the bike. He unhooked the toolbox and carried it toward the old truck parked under the carport. Its faded blue paint chipped and rusted at the wheel wells. Pop the hood for me. Mia did, and Duke leaned over the engine, squinting at it like a doctor looking at an X-ray. He said. Yeah, I see some of it already. Battery terminals are corroded to hell. Belt's cracked too. When's the last time anybody looked at this thing? Honestly? I don't know. Before Grandma got sick, maybe. Duke grunted and got to work, and Mia pulled up an overturned bucket and sat close enough to watch, asking questions the way she always did when she wanted to learn something. What's that part? Called. Why does the belt matter? What happens if the terminals stay corroded? Duke answered every one of them, slow and patient, showing her how to use the wire brush to clean the metal, letting her hold the wrench while he guided her hand to the right bolt. You're a fast learner, he said, watching her tighten a clamp without being told twice. I like knowing how things work, Mia said. Guess that's why nursing makes sense to me. Bodies are just engines too, kind of. Everything's connected to something else. Duke chuckled, low and rough. Never thought of it that way. But yeah, I guess that's true. They worked through the morning, Duke's big hands moving with a kind of confidence that seemed at odds with how careful he was, like he understood that some things needed force and other things needed a gentle touch. Mia watched him closely, and somewhere between handing him tools and holding the flashlight steady, she found herself asking a different kind of question. Did somebody teach you all this? Engines and stuff? Duke didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the belt he was threading into place. Taught myself, mostly. Had an old shop teacher back in high school who let me stay after and mess around with junk cars. First place that ever felt like it made sense to me. He paused. Didn't have much else going for me back then. Mia wanted to ask more. Wanted to ask about his parents, about what 15 looked like for him, but she held back. She'd learned by now that Duke gave pieces of himself the way a locked door gives when you're patient with the handle. You didn't force it. You waited. By late afternoon, the sun had started dipping lower, painting the yard gold and orange. Duke wiped his hands on a rag and straightened up. All right, moment of truth. Get in and turn the key. Mia climbed into the driver's seat, her heart thumping with a silly kind of hope. She turned the key, and the engine coughed, sputtered, and then caught, roaring to life with a steady, healthy rumble that hadn't come out of that truck in months. "It's running." Mia yelled out the window, laughing, and Duke stood back with his arms crossed, a real grin breaking across his face, the first one Mia had seen that reached all the way to his eyes. "Told you I'd fix it," he said. "You did," Mia said, still laughing, patting the dashboard like it was a good dog that had finally learned a trick. Carmen had come out onto the porch at some point during the noise, drawn by the sound of the engine. She stood there now, arms wrapped around herself, watching the two of them with an expression that Mia couldn't quite read, warm around the edges but tight somewhere underneath, like sunlight through a cracked window. "Sounds like you two got it running," Carmen called out. "Good as new," Duke said, wiping his hands one more time. "Well, good as it's gonna get, anyway." Carmen was quiet for a moment, watching him fold up his tools, and then she said, "Why don't you stay for dinner, Duke?" "Least we can do." Duke stayed for dinner that night, and then he stayed for a lot of nights after that. It happened slow, the way a garden grows. You don't see it changing day to day, but one morning you look up and there's flowers where there used to be dirt. The first Tuesday after the truck got fixed, Carmen sat down at the kitchen table with a stack of bills, the way she did every month, sorting them into piles. Pay now. Pay later. Pray about it. She reached for the electric bill, the red overdue stamp glaring up at her, and found it already marked paid. She stared at it for a long minute, turning it over like it might explain itself. "Mia," she called. "Did you pay this?" Mia came in from the living room drying a plate with a dish towel. She looked at the bill, then shook her head. "Not me." They both knew who it was. Neither of them said his name out loud, not right away. Carmen just folded the bill back up and set it on the counter, her hand resting there a second longer than it needed to. That same week, old Mrs. Petroni from 2 lots down was standing on her porch, staring at her railing, which had been wobbling loose for months. She was a thin woman with white hair pulled back tight, and she'd been telling everyone she was going to get her nephew to fix it, though the nephew never seemed to show. Duke rode by on his bike, saw her poking at the wood with a look of quiet frustration, and pulled over without being asked. "That thing's gonna give out on you," he said, walking up the gravel path. "Mind if I take a look, Mrs.?" Petrone eyed him the way most folks still eyed him back then, taking in the leather vest, the patches, the size of him. But she nodded, and by the end of the afternoon, the railing was solid enough to lean your whole weight on. Duke didn't ask for anything in return. He just packed up his tools, told her to holler if anything else needed fixing, and rode off before she could offer him lemonade. Word got around fast in a town that size. People talked at the diner, at the grocery store, over fences. "Did you hear what he did for Carmen Torres? Did you see him fixing up Petroni's porch?" Nobody quite knew what to make of it. A Hell's Angel showing up like some kind of quiet handyman, but the whispers started to shift, little by little, from suspicion to something softer. Then came the shop class. Mia's high school had an elective, Intro to Automotive Repair, taught by a tired old teacher named Mr. Griggs, who worked with equipment that had been outdated since before Mia was born. Half the engines in that classroom didn't even run. When Mia mentioned it to Duke, almost as an afterthought while they were cleaning up his own garage, he didn't say much. But 2 days later, 3 of his chapter brothers showed up at the school in a pickup truck loaded with spare parts, alternators, belts, old carburetors, a couple of decent used batteries, all of it donated without asking for a receipt or a thank you. Mr. Griggs about cried when he saw it. By the second week, something had changed in town that Mia could feel even if she couldn't quite explain it. People who used to cross the street when Duke rode by now lifted a hand and waved. The man at the hardware store called him by name. Even the checkout lady at the grocery store, who used to eye his tattoos like they might bite her, started saving him the good coffee when he came in. Mia noticed all of it, walking beside him through town on errands, watching the way people's faces softened when they saw him coming. He never asked for the change. He never bragged about what he'd done. He just kept showing up, fixing what was broken, giving what he had, and letting his actions speak in a language louder than words. Something in Mia's chest loosened as she watched it happen, an old ache she'd carried so long she'd almost stopped noticing it was there. The empty space where a father should have been. Watching Duke earn the whole town's trust one small kindness at a time, she felt that hollow place inside her begin, for the first time in years, to fill. Duke came by after supper, the way he'd taken to doing most Thursdays, claiming he had a part to drop off for the truck even when the truck ran just fine. Carmen was in the back room, and the kitchen light hung low and yellow over the table, where Mia sat hunched over a stack of papers, chewing the end of a pencil. He set his tool bag down by the door and noticed the brochures first. Glossy pages, corners folded soft from handling, a picture of a woman in blue scrubs smiling on the front. State University School of Nursing, the cover read. Beside it sat a crumpled application, half filled out, like Mia had started it 3 or 4 times and stopped. "What's all this?" Duke said, pulling out the chair across from her without asking. It scraped against the linoleum. Mia glanced up, startled, then shrugged like it was nothing. Nursing program. There's this early scholarship thing. You take an exam, do an interview, and if you get picked, they pay for a chunk of school. She pushed the brochure toward him with one finger, like she wasn't sure she wanted him to see it. Duke picked it up, turned it over in his big scarred hands, studied it the way he studied a busted engine part, looking for what was wrong with it. "So what's stopping you?" Mia let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Everything. She looked down at the crumpled application. Tuition's insane. Even with the scholarship, there's fees just to apply, fees for the exam, fees for I don't even know what. And the spots are competitive. Kids apply from all over the state, kids with tutors and fancy transcripts. I work 30 hours a week at Rosie's. My grades are fine, not amazing. Why would they pick me over somebody who's had every advantage their whole life? Duke didn't say anything right away. He set the brochure down flat on the table, smoothed the folded corner with his thumb like it mattered. "You scared?" he said. Not a question. Mia's eyes stung, and she hated that they did. "Yeah, I'm scared. I'm scared I fill out all this paperwork and pay all this money we don't have, and I don't get picked, and then what? Grandma's still got bills. I'm still working nights. And I've wasted money we needed on some dream that was never gonna happen anyway." She hadn't meant to say all that out loud. It came out of her like water breaking through a crack in a dam, faster than she wanted, more honest than she planned. She wiped at her eyes quick with the back of her hand, embarrassed. Duke leaned back in the chair, arms crossed over his broad chest, looking at her the way he looked at nothing else, steady and unblinking. "Let me tell you something," he said. "Fear's a real thing. I ain't gonna sit here and tell you it ain't." But fear is a lousy reason to quit something before you even start it. You understand what I'm saying? You're not failing this thing yet. You're just scared of failing it. Those are two different animals. Mia stared at him, throat tight. I spent a whole lot of years being scared, Duke went on, voice rough but low. Scared nobody'd ever want me around. Scared if people knew what I really had, what I really was, they'd only want a piece of it. That fear kept me alone a long time, longer than I needed to be. He tapped the brochure with one thick finger. You got a shot here. A real one. I ain't gonna sit here and watch you talk yourself out of it before some college even gets the chance to say no. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a folded bill, and set it on the table without ceremony. Application fees, exam fees, whatever else they want. I got it covered. Mia opened her mouth to argue, but he held up a hand before she could. And the interview, he said. Wherever it's at, I'll drive you. Got a spare helmet in the garage that'll fit you fine. Mia sat there, stunned, staring at him like she wasn't sure she'd heard him right. Something warm and unfamiliar rose up in her chest, spreading slow, the kind of hope she hadn't let herself feel in a long, long time. The morning of the interview came in gray and cool, with fog sitting low over the trailer park like a blanket somebody forgot to pull off. Mia stood outside on the wooden steps at 7 in the morning, wearing the one blazer she owned. The same one she'd worn to her middle school graduation, sleeves a little short now. Her stomach felt like it was full of moths instead of butterflies, something clumsier and more frantic. She heard Duke's bike before she saw it, that low rumble that used to make the whole street twitch with nerves, back before folks got used to it. Now, Mrs. Holloway next door just waved from her porch like it was any other Tuesday. Duke pulled up in front of the trailer and killed the engine. He had a second helmet balanced on the seat behind him, black with a small scuff on one side. Clearly used but clean. You eat? He asked, swinging off the bike. Not hungry. Eat anyway. Granola bar in my jacket pocket. Left side. He tossed her the helmet instead of answering the argument she was building up to make. Put that on. Mia pulled the granola bar out, unwrapped it with shaking fingers, and ate half of it while Duke checked the straps on her helmet, tightening one buckle with a rough tug. You're gonna do fine, he said. You don't know that. No, he agreed, but sitting here scared ain't gonna change the outcome either way. Might as well get on the bike. She climbed on behind him, arms wrapping around his broad leather back the way he'd taught her weeks ago, out in the yard practicing on a bike that wasn't even running. The engine roared to life beneath them. And they pulled out onto the road, fog parting around them like they were cutting through smoke. They rode for 20 minutes, past the diner, past the school, past the edge of town, where the fields opened up wide and gold with early morning light breaking through the clouds. Duke didn't say much at first. Then, at a red light, he spoke without turning his head. You know why I stayed with the club all these years? He said. Wasn't the bikes. Wasn't even the money, though that helped some. It was 'cause when my own blood threw me away, those guys didn't. Didn't ask me to be anything but what I was. Didn't care where I came from, long as I showed up and did right by them. The light turned green, and he eased the bike forward. Family you choose, Mia, that can be stronger than the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the only kind that sticks. Mia rested her cheek against his back for a second. Just a second, and didn't say anything. because there wasn't anything to say that wouldn't come out sounding smaller than what she felt. "You're not going to be walking into that building alone today," Duke said, "even though I'll be sitting outside on this bike like some fool. You carry people with you. Your grandma." "Me too, whether you like it or not." "I like it," Mia said, quiet, almost lost in the wind. They pulled into the university lot 20 minutes later, all brick buildings and manicured lawns. Students walking briskly with backpacks and coffee cups, looking like they belonged there in a way Mia wasn't sure she ever would. Duke parked the bike near the front steps and killed the engine. "Go on," he said. "I'll be right here." Mia pulled off her helmet, hair static and wild, and looked at the glass doors of the building like they were a mouth about to swallow her whole. "Hey." Duke's voice, gruff, steadying. "You already survived worse than some lady with a clipboard asking you questions. Go show her." Mia nodded, swallowed hard, and walked toward the doors, her legs feeling stiff and unfamiliar beneath her, like she was borrowing someone else's body for the occasion. She glanced back once. Duke was still there, arms crossed, leaning against his bike like a mountain that wasn't going anywhere. She pushed through the doors and disappeared inside. The letter came on a Tuesday. Mia had checked the mailbox every day that week, rain or shine, before her shift and after, until Carmen finally told her to quit wearing a path in the gravel. But on Tuesday, there it was, a thick envelope with the university's crest in the corner, sitting on top of a phone bill like it belonged there, like it wasn't about to change everything. She didn't open it right away. She carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and just looked at it for a long minute, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Well," Carmen said from the stove, wiping her hands on her apron. "You gonna stare at it or open it?" Mia opened it. Her eyes moved fast over the words, too fast to really read them the first time, so she had to start over. Slower. "Congratulations. Pleased to inform you. Accepted into the pre-nursing intensive program." She read it 3 times before it felt real. "Grandma." Her voice cracked. "Grandma, I got in." Carmen was across the kitchen in 2 steps, pulling Mia into a hug so tight it nearly knocked the wind out of her, both of them laughing and crying at the same time, that messy kind of joy that doesn't care how it looks. "I knew it," Carmen said into her hair. "I knew it, baby. I always knew it." That night, Carmen declared they were having a real dinner. Not sandwiches, not leftovers reheated for the 3rd time. A real dinner, with her good pot roast and mashed potatoes and the green beans she only made for holidays. And Duke was invited, no arguments allowed. "He drove you to that interview," Carmen said, already pulling ingredients from the cabinets. "Man deserves a plate of food, and a thank you that ain't just words." Duke showed up at 6, freshly washed up, wearing a clean flannel shirt instead of his cut, which Mia noticed but didn't mention. He brought a bottle of sparkling cider, because Carmen didn't keep anything stronger in the house, and he handed it over almost shy, like a kid bringing flowers to a school dance. "Heard congratulations were in order," he said, and Mia grinned so wide her cheeks hurt. Dinner was warm and loud and full of laughter. The kind of evening the trailer hadn't seen in a long time. Maybe ever. Carmen kept refilling plates before anyone asked, and Duke told a story about his first motorcycle, some junk heap he'd rebuilt from scrap parts at 17, that had Mia laughing so hard she nearly choked on her potatoes. But somewhere between the pot roast and the pie Carmen had baked that afternoon, something shifted. Carmen had gone quiet, watching Duke across the table as he reached for his glass. Watching the way his sleeve pulled up just slightly, showing the edge of a faded tattoo on his forearm, an anchor wrapped in rope, inked crooked like it had been done by an amateur, decades old and blurred at the edges. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Grandma?" Mia said. "You okay?" Carmen didn't answer right away. She was staring at Duke's arm, then at the small white scar above his eyebrow, the one Mia had asked about once, and Duke had brushed off with a shrug and a joke about a bar fight that never happened. "Carmen?" Duke set his glass down slow, his easy smile fading into something uncertain. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Carmen's hands were trembling now. She set her fork down carefully, like it weighed too much to hold. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice thin and shaking. "Both of you. I should have said this weeks ago, but I was scared, and I didn't know how, and I kept telling myself I was wrong, that it couldn't be, but I've known. Deep down, I think I've known since that first night at the town meeting." Mia's stomach twisted. "Grandma, you're scaring me." Carmen looked at Duke, really looked at him, tears already gathering at the corners of her eyes. 40 years ago, she said, I was a young nurse, fresh out of school, working nights in the ER because nobody else wanted those shifts. She took a shaky breath. A boy came in one night, 15 years old, beat up bad, scared out of his mind, wouldn't give his real name. Nobody wanted to deal with him, wanted to just hand him to the state and let him become someone else's problem. Duke had gone very still. "I snuck him food," Carmen whispered, "gave him bus fare out of my own pocket, lied to the administrators so they wouldn't send him back to whatever hell he ran from, wouldn't shove him into the system." Her voice broke completely now. "I never knew his name, never knew what happened to him. Until tonight, looking at that scar, that tattoo." She reached a trembling hand toward Duke's arm. "It was you," she said. "That boy was you." Duke didn't move. Didn't breathe, it seemed. The words hung in the air over the pot roast and the green beans, and for a long moment the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the far-off bark of a neighbor's dog. The kitchen seemed to tilt sideways. He was 15 again. Cold concrete under his back, blood in his mouth, the taste of copper and fear. He'd run 3 miles in the dark after his old man had come at him with a belt buckle for the last time, run until his lungs burned and his legs gave out, and he'd stumbled into that ER, not even sure what town he was in. He remembered the fluorescent lights. Too bright. Too white. He remembered flinching every time someone touched him, sure that someone would call his father, sure that someone would send him back. And he remembered her. A young nurse, hair pulled back tight, tired eyes that weren't tired when they looked at him. She hadn't asked too many questions. She'd just worked. "You had a butterfly bandage," Duke said, his voice rough and far away, like it belonged to someone else. "Over my eyebrow. Wouldn't stop bleeding. You kept telling me to hold still, and I kept telling you I was fine, and you said—" "I said fine people don't bleed through 3 bandages," Carmen finished, tears sliding down her face now, unashamed. "I remember. I remember you wouldn't stop shaking, even after we got the bleeding stopped, like your body couldn't believe it was safe." Duke's jaw tightened. His big hands, the hands that could rebuild an engine blind, rested flat on the table like he didn't trust them to do anything else. "You gave me a granola bar," he said, "from your own bag. and 2 20s folded up so small I almost missed 'em, tucked in my shirt pocket when you thought I wasn't looking. Bus fare, Carmen whispered. I told the front desk you'd already been picked up by a relative. I lied straight to their faces. I could have lost my job. You told me, Duke said slowly, dragging the memory up from somewhere buried deep, somewhere he hadn't touched in decades, that I was gonna be somebody someday. That whatever was happening to me wasn't gonna be the whole story. Carmen nodded, crying too hard now to speak. Mia sat frozen, looking between them, her chest aching with something she didn't have words for yet. 40 years. 2 strangers connected by one desperate night, and now, decades later, connected again through her, through an accident on a rainy road she never could have planned. It should have felt like a miracle. And for a moment, watching Carmen reach for Duke's scarred hand, it did, but something in Duke's face had changed. He wasn't looking at Carmen anymore. He was staring down at his own hands, turning them over like he was seeing them for the first time, like they belonged to that scared kid on the ER table instead of the grown man sitting at this table now. Duke? Mia said softly. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had gone flat, careful, like he was holding something in with both hands so it wouldn't spill. So that's what this was, he said. Duke. No, Carmen started. That's not what I meant. I only wanted you to know that I always wondered what happened to you. I never meant for it to sound like the check, Duke said, cutting her off, not unkindly, but far away, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. The mentoring. All of it. He shook his head slowly. I thought Mia saved my life because it was the right thing to do. I thought your family took me in because you wanted to. Turns out I've been somebody's debt to settle since before she was even born. That's not true, Mia said, her voice rising, panic creeping in. Duke. That's not what this is. But he was already pushing back his chair, the legs scraping hard against the linoleum floor. He stood, and for the first time since Mia had known him, he looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the revelation had folded something in him. Thank you for dinner, Carmen, he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. It was good. Really was. Duke, please, sit down. We can talk about this. I should go. He grabbed his jacket off the back of the chair, hands not quite steady. Got an early morning. He didn't look at Mia. Didn't look at the pie still sitting untouched on the counter. He just walked out the door into the dark, the screen door banging shut behind him, and neither of them moved to stop him, too stunned to do anything but watch him go. The days that followed felt like a held breath. Mia texted Duke on Monday, just a simple message asking how he was doing. No answer. She tried again on Tuesday, something lighter, a joke about the truck making a weird noise again, hoping it might pull a laugh out of him the way it usually did. Nothing came back. By Wednesday, she stopped typing anything at all, just stared at the last message she'd sent, the little bubble sitting there unanswered, unread for all she knew. She rode her bike past the garage where he sometimes worked on bikes for extra cash, slowing down enough to see if his motorcycle was parked outside. It wasn't. She told herself he was just busy. Bikers had lives, obligations, things that had nothing to do with her, but some part of her, the part that had learned a long time ago not to trust when things were going too good, knew better. The truth came to her the way most truths came in a small town, sideways, through someone else's mouth. She was refilling ketchup bottles at Rosie's on Thursday afternoon when she heard 2 women talking in the corner booth, their voices pitched low, but not low enough. Heard the whole chapters packing up. One of them was saying stirring sugar into her coffee like it was the most natural gossip in the world. Moving out to Nevada or Arizona, somewhere like that. My sister's boyfriend works at the garage, says Duke's the one pushing for it. Real sudden too. Wonder what happened, the other woman said. Thought he was settling in real nice around here. Fixed the Hendersons' porch just last month. Well, you know how those types are. Here today, gone tomorrow. Mia's hands had gone still around the ketchup bottle. She set it down carefully, like it might shatter if she wasn't gentle, and walked into the back room before either woman could see her face. Rosie found her there a few minutes later, arms crossed, leaning against the walk-in cooler. You heard that, Rosie said. It wasn't a question. Mia nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Honey, I don't know what happened between you two, Rosie said, softer now, but I've known Duke Callahan 2 years, and I've never seen a man light up the way he does when he talks about you and your grandmother. Whatever's going on, don't let gossip tell you the whole story. But gossip had already told Mia enough. Duke was leaving, and she didn't understand why. She went home that night with her stomach in knots, her acceptance letter for the nursing intensive sitting on her dresser where she'd propped it up, a countdown clock ticking toward the day she'd have to leave for the summer program. She'd wanted to tell Duke first. She'd imagined him grinning that rare, crooked grin of his, maybe even offering to drive her the whole way there on his bike just so he could see the campus for himself. Instead, he wasn't answering his phone, and his whole chapter was apparently packing boxes. She found Carmen at the kitchen table, an old photo album open in front of her, though she wasn't really looking at it, just staring past it, the way she'd been staring past a lot of things these past few days. He's leaving, Mia said, no preamble, no easing into it. The whole chapter. Moving out of state. Rosie heard it from customers, everybody in town's talking about it. Carmen's shoulders sank. Grandma. Mia's voice cracked. What happened at that dinner? What did you say to him? Carmen closed the photo album slowly, her hands trembling just slightly. I told him the truth, she said. I thought it would bring us closer. I thought if he knew I was the one who helped him all those years ago, it would mean something good. That it would prove none of this was an accident. That maybe there was a reason all this happened. So what went wrong? Carmen's eyes filled with tears, and this time she didn't try to hide them. I think I made him feel like a debt, she whispered. Like everything he's given us, everything he's done, all of it. It wasn't him choosing us. It was just him paying something back. And that man has spent his whole life feeling like nobody ever wanted him for free. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. I did that, Mia. I think I drove him away. I think I took the one good thing we found, and I broke it. And I don't know how to fix it. The suitcase on Mia's bed stayed half empty for 3 days. She would fold a shirt, set it inside, then stand there staring at nothing until the folded shirt seemed to blur at the edges. Then, she'd force herself to move again, pick up socks, a toothbrush, the box of pens Rosie had given her as a going-away gift, with a note taped to it that said write down everything. Someday you'll want to remember it all. She wanted to remember all of it. That was the problem. Every part of the last few months had Duke's fingerprints on it, and now those same memories felt like bruises she kept pressing on just to check if they still hurt. The acceptance letter sat propped against her lamp, corners starting to curl from how many times she'd picked it up and put it back down. 2 weeks. That was all she had left before she'd climb into Carmen's ancient truck, the one Duke had fixed with his own hands, and drive 4 hours to a campus she'd never seen, to start a life she'd dreamed about since she was old enough to know what dreaming was. She should have been thrilled. Some mornings she almost was, for the length of a heartbeat, before she remembered. Carmen tried. She really did. She left little notes on the counter, cheerful reminders about packing lists and bus schedules and things to buy from the store in town before Mia left. She hummed while she cooked, the way she used to before all of this. But Mia caught her sometimes, standing at the window looking out toward the road, like she was hoping to see a motorcycle come rumbling up the drive. It never did. At the diner, Rosie stopped asking if Mia had heard from him. The answer was always the same, and after a while, some questions just didn't need to be asked out loud anymore. Mia scrolled back through old photos on her phone one night, sitting cross-legged on her bed with the suitcase pushed to the floor. She hadn't meant to. She'd been looking for a picture of Carmen to send to the nursing program for some form, and her thumb had slipped, and suddenly there it was, an entire gallery of Duke. Duke, grease smudged across his forehead, grinning up at her from underneath the hood of Carmen's truck, one hand holding a wrench like a trophy. She remembered that day so clearly. The way he'd made her hand him tools one at a time, quizzing her on their names, laughing his gravel laugh every time she got one wrong. Duke, on his motorcycle outside the scholarship building, helmet under his arm, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him, like he was the one about to be interviewed instead of her. She remembered him squeezing her shoulder before she walked inside. "You already earned this," he'd said. "Don't let them make you doubt it." Duke at the kitchen table the night of the celebration dinner, sleeves rolled up, laughing at something Carmen said, looking for all the world like he belonged there. Like he'd always belonged there. Mia's throat tightened as she flipped through picture after picture. This wasn't some stranger who happened to be nice to her family for a while. This was Duke. Her Duke in the way that mattered, the way family was supposed to matter. And he was just going to leave, drive off to some new town in some new state, and let all of this become nothing but old photos on a phone. She thought about waiting. She thought about giving him space, the way Carmen kept saying they should, giving him time to sort through whatever old wound had cracked open inside him. But 2 weeks wasn't very much time. And Mia had learned a long time ago that waiting for people to come around on their own didn't always work. Sometimes people needed somebody to go after them. She thought about the guardrail on Route 9, the flames, the way she hadn't stopped to think before she'd gone sliding down that embankment. She hadn't waited then. She hadn't calculated the risk or convinced herself it wasn't her problem. She wasn't going to start waiting now. Mia set her phone down, closed the suitcase halfway, and reached for her jacket. The clubhouse sat at the edge of town where the paved road gave up and turned to gravel. A long, low building with metal siding that had gone the color of rust in some places and dull silver in others. A row of motorcycles lined the front lot, chrome catching the early sun, and a faded banner hung crooked above the door. Mia had passed this place 100 times in Carmen's truck, always looking straight ahead, the way everybody in town did, like looking too long might invite trouble. She pedaled her bike up the gravel drive with her heart slamming against her ribs, wishing she'd thought to bring anything else. A jacket that didn't make her look so much like a kid. Some kind of plan beyond just showing up. But there hadn't been time to plan. There hadn't been time for anything except getting here before she lost her nerve. 3 men were sitting on lawn chairs near the door, cuts on their shoulders, coffee cups in their hands. They stopped talking the second they saw her. One of them, a heavy-set man with a gray beard down to his chest, set his cup down slow and stood up. "Help you with something?" he said. Not mean, just wary, the way you'd talk to somebody who didn't belong somewhere. Mia's mouth had gone dry. She swallowed and made herself get off the bike, made herself walk it the last few feet instead of turning around, which was what every nerve in her body was screaming at her to do. "I'm looking for Duke," she said. "Duke Callahan." The men exchanged a look. Something passed between them, quick and unreadable, and the bearded one squinted at her a little harder. "You're that girl," he said. It wasn't a question. "Mia," she said. Yes, another one of the men, younger with a shaved head and a tattoo of a bird crawling up his neck, gave a short laugh that didn't have much humor in it. "Kid's got nerve, riding all the way out here." "Is he here?" Mia asked, ignoring the way her voice wanted to shake. "I just need a few minutes." The bearded man studied her a long moment, like he was trying to decide something. Then he turned his head toward the clubhouse door and hollered Duke's name, loud enough that it echoed off the metal siding. Mia stood there gripping the handlebars of her bike so hard her knuckles ached, waiting, the seconds stretching out long and awful. She thought about leaving. She thought about how easy it would be to just get back on the bike and pedal away before he even came outside, save herself whatever look was about to cross his face. Then the door swung open, and Duke stepped out. He looked different than she remembered, even though it had only been a couple weeks. Tired, maybe, older around the eyes. He was wearing a plain gray shirt instead of his cut, and for a second, he just stood in the doorway blinking against the sunlight like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "Mia?" he said. His voice came out rough, guarded, like he wasn't sure yet if he wanted this to be real. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to talk to you," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "And you weren't answering your phone. And you weren't coming around anymore. So I figured I'd come to you." Duke's jaw tightened. He glanced past her at the men watching from their lawn chairs, then back at her, and something in his face shifted, some old wall going up even higher than before. "This isn't really a place for you to be hanging around, kid. I don't care," Mia said. "I'm not leaving until you hear me out." For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The bearded man cleared his throat and looked away, suddenly very interested in his coffee. Duke exhaled slow through his nose, rubbed a hand down his face, and finally, reluctantly, jerked his chin toward the side of the building, away from the others. "Fine," he said. "Not out here. Come on." He turned and started walking, and after a second, Mia left her bike leaning against the fence and followed him. They walked around the side of the clubhouse to where the gravel gave way to a strip of dead grass. A couple of old oil drums turned on their sides for seats, and the sound of the men's voices faded behind them. Duke leaned against the metal siding, arms crossed, not looking at her. Mia stood in front of him, hands jammed in her jacket pockets so he wouldn't see them shaking. "Say what you came to say," Duke said. His voice was flat, tired. Mia took a breath. "You think this is about the money? Or about what Grandma did for you back then? You think that's why we want you around? Like we're just paying you back for something, or like it's fate, or whatever word makes it easier for you to leave." Duke's jaw worked, but he didn't say anything. "It's not," Mia said. "I didn't pull you off that road because of some debt nobody even knew existed. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know Grandma had ever met you. I saw a man about to burn alive, and I didn't think. I just moved. That's it. That's the whole reason. There wasn't a bigger plan. There wasn't some circle closing. There was just you. And me. And I couldn't let you die there. Mia. I'm not done. Her voice cracked a little, but she pushed through it. And now, this thing we have, you teaching me about engines, you showing up for dinner, you driving me to that interview and giving me a stupid pep talk in a parking lot, that's not because of a debt either. That's because I like who you are. Grandma likes who you are. We didn't get stuck with you because of some story from 30 years ago. We chose you. Same as you chose those guys back there. Duke looked away, out toward the tree line past the gravel lot, and his throat moved like he was trying to swallow something down. You told us once, Mia said, softer now, that your parents left you when you were 15. That nobody wanted you, and so you found people who did. You didn't wait around hoping your real family would come back. You built a new one. That took guts. That wasn't weakness, Duke. That was the strongest thing I ever heard anybody do. That's different, Duke muttered. Why? He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice had gone rough in a different way, like something in him had cracked open. Because those guys, they didn't know me before. They didn't owe me anything. They just took me in because I showed up half-starved and desperate, and they didn't ask questions. Your grandmother, she helped me because she felt sorry for a kid nobody wanted. And now I come back into your life, and it's the same story all over again. Somebody helping the sad, broken biker. I don't know how to be anything else to people, Mia. I don't know what it's like to just be wanted. Not helped. Not fixed. Not repaid. Wanted. His voice caught on the last word, and he looked down at the dirt like he was ashamed of himself for saying it out loud. Mia felt her own eyes sting, but she didn't look away from him. You are wanted, she said. Not because of anything you did 30 years ago. Because of who you are right now. Because you fixed our truck without being asked. Because you taught me how to check my own oil so I wouldn't get ripped off at some shop. Because when I got that acceptance letter, you were the first person I wanted to call. That's not a debt, Duke. That's just family. The silence between them stretched out long, filled only with the wind moving through the gravel lot and somebody's laughter drifting faintly from the front of the clubhouse. Duke stood there, with his arms still crossed, but his shoulders had dropped, like something heavy had shifted off them. Your grandmother, he said finally, quiet. She still want to talk to me? She never stopped wanting to, Mia said. She just didn't know how to say it without you running again. Duke was quiet a moment longer, staring at nothing. Then he pushed off the wall, standing up straight, and looked at her with something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something worn down but not broken. Let me grab my keys, he said. I'll follow you back into town. The ride back into town felt longer than it was. Mia sat behind Duke on the borrowed bike, her arms around his middle, watching the dark trees blur past on either side of the road. Neither of them spoke. There wasn't anything left to say that hadn't already been said in that gravel lot behind the clubhouse. The wind was cold against her face, but it felt clean somehow, like it was blowing away something that had been sitting heavy in her chest for days. Duke drove slower than usual. Mia noticed it but didn't say anything. Maybe he needed the extra minutes to get his thoughts in order. Maybe he was scared. She figured a man like Duke Callahan didn't scare easy, not after everything he'd lived through. But this was different. This wasn't a burning motorcycle or a room full of suspicious neighbors. This was Carmen. When they turned onto the gravel road that led to the trailer park, Mia saw her first. Carmen was sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in her old cardigan, even though the night wasn't that cold. She'd probably been sitting there for hours. The porch light was on, moths circling it in lazy loops, and Carmen's hands were folded tight in her lap like she was praying, or maybe just trying to keep them from shaking. The bike's headlights swept across the yard, and Carmen stood up fast, one hand gripping the porch rail. Mia could see her grandmother's face even from a distance, the way it went from worried to something like disbelief, like she couldn't quite trust what she was seeing until Duke cut the engine and the world went quiet again. Mia climbed off first. She didn't say anything. She just looked between the two of them, then walked up the steps and past her grandmother, giving Carmen's shoulder a small squeeze on her way by. This wasn't her moment. She'd already said her piece back at the clubhouse. This part belonged to Duke and Carmen alone. Duke stood by the bike for a second, helmet still in his hands, like he wasn't sure his legs would carry him the rest of the way. Then he set the helmet down on the seat and walked toward the porch, slow and steady, the gravel crunching under his boots. Carmen came down the steps to meet him halfway. Her eyes were already wet. "I didn't know if you'd come back," she said, her voice small in a way Mia had never heard before. "I almost didn't," Duke admitted. "Took a stubborn kid showing up at my clubhouse to talk some sense into me." Carmen let out a laugh that was half a sob. That sounds like her. Duke looked down at the woman standing in front of him, this small, tired, kind woman who had once been young enough to risk her job and her safety for a broken kid nobody else wanted. "You saved my life," he said. "Way before Mia ever pulled me off that road. You gave a scared 15-year-old bus fare and a sandwich and didn't ask questions when every other adult in that hospital wanted to send me back to a place that would have killed me eventually. I never forgot that, Carmen. Not once in 30 years. I thought about you," Carmen said, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "For years. I wondered if you made it, if you were even still alive." And then Mia came home soaking wet, talking about a biker she pulled off Route 9, and I saw that tattoo on your arm at the hospital and I thought my heart was going to stop. "When you asked me to leave the money on hold," Duke said, "I thought you didn't want me around. I thought you were scared of me." "I was scared," Carmen said, "but not of you. I was scared of losing what we'd already started building. I was scared that once you knew the whole truth, you'd feel like none of it was real, like it was just some circle closing instead of something we chose." Duke's eyes were shining now, too, and he didn't bother hiding it. "It is real," he said. "That's what I came here to tell you. Nothing's changed, Carmen. Not really. I still care about you and that girl the same as I did before I knew who you were to me. I just understand now why it feels like more than luck that she pulled me off that road. Fate gave us a second chance to finish something we started a long time ago." Carmen reached up and touched his face, the way a mother might touch the face of a son she'd worried over for years. "Welcome home, Duke," she whispered. Duke pulled her into a hug, careful and gentle despite his size, and Carmen cried against his shoulder while the porch light buzzed above them and the moths kept circling. The next morning, Duke showed up before the sun had even burned off the dew on the grass. Mia heard the rumble of his bike from inside the trailer, and looked out the window to see him already unloading lumber from a borrowed truck, his sleeves rolled up past his tattooed forearms. "You're gonna wake the whole park," Carmen said, stepping out onto the porch with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Duke without being asked. "Figured it's about time this place got some love," Duke said, looking up at the sagging roofline and the paint peeling off the siding in long curls. "That is, if you'll let me." Carmen looked at the trailer she'd lived in for over 20 years, the one that had survived 2 hurricanes and 100 small heartbreaks. "It's about time," she agreed. That was how it started. Duke didn't ask permission for much after that. He just showed up, day after day, sometimes with a couple of the guys from the chapter trailing behind him in their leather vests, carrying tools instead of trouble. The neighbors who used to peek through their blinds now waved from their porches. Word got around town fast that the Hells Angels were fixing up the Torres place, and more than a few people showed up with casseroles and cold lemonade, standing around just to watch. Mia split her time between helping with the renovations and studying for her nursing intensive. Duke made her sit at the kitchen table every evening with her books spread out while he worked on the wiring or patched a hole in the wall, asking her questions about anatomy terms just so she'd have to say them out loud. "What's this one mean?" he asked one evening, squinting at a page in her workbook. "Tachycardia?" "Tachycardia," Mia corrected. Laughing, "It means your heart's beating too fast." "Huh," Duke said, setting down his hammer. "Been feeling that a lot lately." Mia looked up at him, and for a second, neither of them said anything. Then Duke just grinned and went back to work like he hadn't said anything at all, but Mia understood. It wasn't about a fast heartbeat. It was about everything that came with being part of something again. Carmen took charge of the money the way she'd always wanted to. Careful and deliberate, nothing wasted, nothing wild. She paid off the last of her medical bills first, the ones that had been sitting like a weight on her chest for years. Then, she set aside money for Mia's nursing program, more than enough to cover every semester without Mia having to work herself sick at the diner. What was left, she put toward the house. New siding went up first, a soft blue that Carmen had always wanted but never could afford. Then came the roof, sturdy and new, no more buckets catching rain in the hallway during storms. Duke rebuilt the porch steps himself, sanding each board smooth so Carmen wouldn't trip on the splinters that used to catch her slippers. Inside, the kitchen got new cabinets, a real stove that worked on all 4 burners, and countertops that didn't wobble when you leaned on them. Rosie stopped by one afternoon with a pie and stood in the doorway with her hands on her hips. "Would you look at this place?" she said, looking around at the fresh paint and new floors. "Feels like a whole different house. Feels like a whole different life," Carmen said quietly, and Rosie just smiled and set the pie down on the new counter. By the end of the month, the trailer didn't look like the same tired old thing it had been for years. It looked like a home, the kind Mia used to see in magazines and think was only for other people, not families like hers. The night the last of the work was finished, Duke stayed for dinner. Carmen made her famous pot roast, the kind she used to only make on special occasions when there was enough money for a good cut of meat. The 3 of them sat around the new kitchen table, the smell of fresh paint still lingering faintly in the air, and ate together like it was something they'd been doing for years instead of months. "To new beginnings," Carmen said, raising her glass of sweet tea. Duke raised his glass too, looking at the 2 of them like he still couldn't quite believe his luck. "To family," he said. Mia clinked her glass against both of theirs. "To family," she echoed, and for the first time in a long time, the word didn't feel like something she'd lost. It felt like something she'd finally found. Word got around fast after that. It always did in a town this small. By the following week, everyone at Rosie's Diner had heard some version of the story. The Hells Angels weren't leaving. Duke Callahan wasn't just fixing up one trailer. He was staying for good, and so was his whole chapter. "You believe that?" one of the regulars said to Rosie, stirring his coffee. "Them bikers putting down roots." "Believe it," Rosie said, refilling his cup without looking up. "Seen it with my own eyes. The change didn't happen all at once. But it happened. It started small. A few of the guys from Duke's chapter showed up at old Mrs. Kessler's place down on Willow Street, fixing her sagging porch the same way they'd fixed Carmen's. Mrs. Kessler had been telling everyone for years that bikers were nothing but trouble, but after they spent a Saturday replacing her rotted steps and never once asked for a dime, she started bringing lemonade out to the yard every time she heard their engines. Then came the school. The auto shop teacher, a tired man named Mr. Griggs, who'd been begging the district for new equipment for years, got a phone call one afternoon from Duke asking what the kids needed. 2 weeks later, a truck pulled up outside the school unloading tools, spare parts, even a used engine block for the students to practice on. The leather vests didn't scare the kids anymore. They started calling the bikers by name. Duke didn't do it for the credit. He never wanted the credit. But little by little, the town started seeing something different when the rumble of motorcycles rolled down Main Street. They stopped locking their doors a little faster. They stopped pulling their kids closer. By the time summer came around, the chapter had started something bigger. They called it the Route 9 Ride, a charity event to raise money for families who were drowning in the same kind of debt that had once nearly swallowed the Torres family whole. Duke organized it himself, working with Carmen and Mia to figure out exactly what a family in that kind of trouble needed most. Medical bills, rent, a used car that ran without breaking down every other week. The morning of the event, Main Street looked like nothing Mia had ever seen. Rows of motorcycles lined up outside the diner, chrome catching the early sun, leather vests everywhere she looked. But mixed in with the bikers were families from town, kids running around with balloons, church ladies setting up folding tables loaded with baked goods. Rosie had closed the diner for the day just so she could run a hot dog stand out front. Carmen stood next to Mia, watching the crowd grow. "Never thought I'd see the day," she said, shaking her head with a small smile. "Me neither," Mia said. Duke walked over, dressed in his usual leather vest, but there was something different in the way he carried himself now. Less guarded, like he finally believed he belonged somewhere. The ride raised more money in one day than anyone expected, enough to help 3 struggling families in town pay off medical debt and catch up on rent. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the sight of the whole town coming together, bikers and churchgoers and shop owners standing side by side like none of it had ever seemed impossible. Near the end of the day, the mayor climbed up onto a small stage set up in front of the diner, microphone in hand. "Before we close things out," he said, "there's a couple people I think this town owes a proper thank you to." He called Duke and Mia up to the stage together. The crowd clapped, louder than Mia expected, loud enough that her ears went warm. Duke walked up beside her, looking almost nervous for the first time since she'd known him. "A year ago," the mayor said, "most of us in this town were scared of a man like Duke Callahan, and most of us didn't know the name Mia Torres at all. Today, because of an act of courage on the side of Route 9, and because of a man who chose to give back instead of walk away, our town is stronger than it's ever been. The crowd clapped again, and someone in the back let out a whistle. Mia looked over at Duke, who was staring out at the crowd like he still couldn't quite believe any of it was real. The morning Mia left, the sky was the color of a peach, soft orange creeping up over the trees behind the trailer. Mia stood in the doorway with her last bag in her hand, looking at the truck parked in the driveway. It didn't look like the same truck anymore. The dents were gone. The rust had been sanded away and painted over with a deep blue that caught the morning light. Duke had worked on it for weeks, sometimes staying so late that Carmen had to bring him coffee just to keep his hands from shaking with tiredness. "You sure you got everything?" Carmen asked, hovering by the truck bed like she wasn't quite ready to stop checking. "Grandma, I've checked like 4 times, Mia said, laughing a little. "Check a 5th, Carmen said, and Mia did, if only to make her smile. Duke came around from the front of the truck, wiping his hands on a rag out of habit, even though there was no grease left to wipe. He looked at the truck bed, then at Mia, then back at the truck like he was making sure it was all exactly right. "Run smooth now," he said. "Changed the oil, checked the brakes twice. You're not breaking down on the highway, not on my watch. I know, Duke. You've told me that already. Twice, worth telling 3 times. Mia set her bag down in the truck bed next to the others, right beside the box of clothes and the smaller bag stuffed with books she'd already read twice out of nerves. Carmen reached over and straightened the strap on one of the bags, even though it didn't need straightening. It was something to do with her hands, something to keep her from crying too early. "This is a big day," Carmen said quietly, mostly to herself. "It is," Duke said. He was looking at Mia the way a man looks at something he's proud of and still can't quite believe is his to be proud of. Mia felt her throat tighten. She wasn't ready to leave. Not really. Not the trailer with its new paint. Not Carmen's kitchen that smelled like cinnamon most mornings. Not the sound of Duke's motorcycle rumbling up the driveway on Sunday afternoons. "You'll do good," Duke said. "Better than good. You're gonna make one heck of a nurse." "You don't know that." "I do know that," he said. "Same way I knew that day on Route 9 you weren't gonna leave me on that road. Some people just got it in them." Mia wiped at her eyes before the tears could really start. Duke reached into the cab of the truck and pulled something out from behind the seat. It was wrapped loosely in brown paper, small enough to fit in 2 hands. "Got something for you," he said, holding it out. Mia unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a motorcycle helmet, small and sturdy, painted a deep blue that matched the truck exactly. It had been sanded down and repainted, the scratches buffed out, a new strap fitted along the chin. "I fixed it up myself," Duke said. "Old helmet from years back. Figured it needed a second life." Mia turned it over in her hands, feeling the weight of it, the careful work in every inch. "Ride safe," Duke said, his voice rougher than usual. "On the road. In life. Same rule applies to both. You watch where you're going, you don't let anybody run you off the path, and you don't let fear make the choice for you. You hear me?" Mia nodded, unable to speak for a second. "I hear you." Carmen stepped in close, wrapping her arms around Mia first, holding on tight enough that Mia felt her grandmother's whole body shaking with the effort of not crying. Duke wrapped his arms around them both a second later, awkward at first, then steady, like he'd been doing it his whole life instead of just the last year. They stood there on the porch, the three of them tangled together in one long hug, nobody in a hurry to let go. "Go on now," Carmen finally said, pulling back and wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Before I start crying so hard I can't see you drive off." Mia laughed, climbing into the truck with the helmet resting carefully on the passenger seat beside her. She started the engine, felt it hum smooth and steady beneath her, and pulled out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, she watched Duke and Carmen standing on the porch, arms around each other, growing smaller as she drove toward the road. Her vision blurred with tears, but she was smiling the whole time. 3 months into her nursing program, Mia had learned that hospitals never really slept, and neither did nursing students. Her days started before the sun came up and ended long after it went down, filled with textbooks thick enough to stop a door and lectures that made her head spin. But she loved it. Every tired bone in her body loved it. She lived in a small dorm room on campus now, the walls covered with sticky notes full of terms she was trying to memorize. Blood pressure ranges, medication names, the proper way to check a pulse. Her roommate, a quiet girl named Priya who wanted to be a pediatrician, often found Mia asleep at her desk with a highlighter still in her hand. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, Mia volunteered at the campus clinic, helping check people in, taking basic vitals under supervision, learning how to talk to nervous patients in a way that made them feel less scared. She was good at it. The clinic director, a stern but kind woman named Dr. Alvarez, had told her more than once that she had a gift for making people feel safe. "You've got steady hands, Doctor," Alvarez said one afternoon, watching Mia wrap a bandage with careful precision. "And a steady heart. That's rarer than you'd think." Mia had thought about Duke when she heard that. Steady hands. She'd learned that phrase from him, back when he taught her how to hold a wrench without letting it slip, how to check the oil in the truck without spilling it everywhere. Steady hands, steady heart. Maybe those two things went together more than people realized. It was a Thursday afternoon, right after her shift at the clinic ended, when Mia checked her mailbox in the dorm lobby and found a package waiting for her. It was a small box, wrapped in plain brown paper, her name written across the front in handwriting she recognized instantly. Duke's handwriting was blocky and uneven, like it belonged to someone who spent more time holding wrenches than pens. Her heart gave a little jump. She carried the box up to her room, setting her backpack down without even bothering to unzip it, and sat cross-legged on her bed with the package in her lap. She peeled back the paper carefully, the way Duke had taught her to handle things that mattered. Inside was a smaller box, and inside that was a folded piece of paper resting on top of something wrapped in soft cloth. Mia unfolded the paper first. The handwriting was the same blocky scrawl, but the words hit her like a wave. "Ride safe. Kid. Love. Your family." She read it twice, then a third time, her eyes stinging before she even understood why. She pressed the note to her chest for a moment, feeling the paper crinkle against her shirt, before setting it gently aside. Then, she unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a photograph, slightly worn at the edges like it had been handled with care, but not quite carefully enough to avoid a few soft creases. It showed Duke and Carmen standing side by side in front of the trailer, the one that used to have peeling paint and a sagging porch step. Now it looked brand new, the siding a crisp white, the porch rebuilt with sturdy railings, and a fresh coat of paint on the steps. Flowers bloomed in pots along the porch, the kind Carmen always said she wanted but never had time to plant. Duke stood with his arm around Carmen's shoulders, both of them smiling wide, real smiles, the kind that reached all the way to the eyes. Behind them, further down the road, Mia could just make out the shape of the Hells Angels clubhouse, motorcycles lined up out front like a row of loyal soldiers standing guard. Mia stared at the photo for a long moment, her vision blurring with tears she didn't try to stop. She thought about the night on Route 9, the rain, the fire, the fear. She thought about the biker she'd pulled from the wreckage, a stranger then, family now. She thought about her grandmother's trembling hands the day she'd finally told the truth, and about Duke walking away, and about finding him again at the clubhouse, and about all the small moments in between that had turned strangers into the people she loved most in the world. She smiled through the tears, holding the photograph carefully in both hands, understanding now what she hadn't fully understood before. Sometimes the family that saves you isn't the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you find on the side of a rainy road, the one that shows up when you least expect it, the one that chooses you back just as fiercely as you chose them. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.